Just take a look at this sneaky move. This is Caleb Plant, an undefeated super middleweight champion who not only knew how to fight, but also mastered the art of getting under his opponent's skin. He was known for his cockiness, bold antics, and dirty tactics. At press conferences, he didn't just talk, he provoked. But at some point, it seemed like he started believing in his own invincibility, and that turned out to be his fatal mistake. Unfortunately for him, a true nightmare of professional boxing had entered his division, Saul Canelo Alvarez, a man who doesn't need loud words, he speaks with his fists. At the pre-fight press conference, the tension was already running high. It seemed like things couldn't escalate further until one of the fighters decided to throw fuel on the fire. Everyone instantly understood. Alvarez had entered fight mode long before the opening bell. Plant seemed to think his mind games had worked. He believed he had gotten into Canelo's head and was already winning the battle before stepping into the ring. But he forgot who he was dealing with. Standing in front of him wasn't just a champion, it was the pound-for-pound king, a man who had made a career out of punishing those who mistook arrogance for confidence. Caleb's undefeated status had clearly gone to his head. He came into the fight thinking this was his moment of glory. But Saul Alvarez, ever the composed tactician, wasn't fazed. He entered the ring calm and collected, fully aware that the early rounds weren't going in his favor. The scorecard showed he was trailing, but Canelo didn't panic. He waited, patiently, waiting for the moment when Plant's defense would crack, when overconfidence would turn into vulnerability. Closer to the middle, the forces were equal. Caleb threw an uppercut, and Canelo pinned him in the corner. And after that, the corners became a permanent place for Caleb to defend himself, as he was pinned down again and again by combinations. Every attempt by Plant to break Alvarez was immediately accompanied by a surge of emotion from Canelo, as if he was trying to bring the American down to earth with any attempt to elevate himself. At some point, it became like a cautionary tale, a one-sided beating. But even despite the legend's confidence, the American didn't just not give up, he gave a worthy rebuff. At that moment, it was not obvious who would win, and even now, Canelo landed such powerful punches right to the temple, and at one point even received a reprimand from the referee for making an illegal strike. He apparently accidentally hit the groin area and realized it himself right away, and apologized to his opponent. And then something began that was impossible to watch without slow-mo, a wild fight, but without a single powerful hit. Were they lucky? At that moment, both were tired, but one was out of focus, and the other went into berserker mode, fight or die. Plant started making fun of Canelo. By the way, it was in vain, because Alvarez was not in a state to tolerate ridicule. He moved forward. Plant was literally getting burned by Canelo's punches, but Alvarez needed to finish the fight. That moment came in the 11th round. Alvarez started to close in. With a series of short, precise combinations, he dropped Plant to the canvas. The arena erupted. Caleb struggled to his feet, signaling he could go on. But Canelo had no intention of giving him a second chance. Another lightning-fast assault, and Plant went down again. This time, it was over. This was the most disgraceful act by a woman in UFC history. No one saw it coming. But the outcome of this fight? Tears mixed with snot and a career-ending humiliation. She got exactly what she deserved. Ji-yeon Kim and Nadia Qasim came from completely different worlds, yet fate brought them together in one of the most unforgettable and controversial fights in UFC history. Kim, a disciplined and well-rounded striker from South Korea, had built her reputation on technical precision and patience. She wasn't one to get caught up in trash talk or theatrics. Her fists did all the talking. Qasim, on the other hand, was an Australian prospect with a reckless fighting style, fueled by aggression and a belief that intimidation could win fights before they even started. From the opening bell, it was clear that this was more than just a fight. It was a test of character. Kim, in a display of sportsmanship, extended her hand for a respectful glove touch, only to receive a disgusting cheap shot, a sneaky kick to the ribs from Qasim. The crowd gasped, but Kim didn't let it shake her focus. A sharp counterhook landed in response, sending a message that she wasn't going to be bullied, but she wasn't in a rush to finish things. No, a quick knockout wouldn't be enough. Qasim needed to feel every second of what was coming to her. The first round saw Qasim charging forward recklessly, throwing wild punches, trying to overwhelm Kim with sheer volume. But Kim's composure was unshaken. By the second round, Qasim was already breathing heavily. She tried to repeat her dirty antics, attempting to feint a friendly glove touch again, but Kim wasn't falling for it. Instead, the South Korean unloaded a brutal combination, snapping Qasim's head back with a stiff jab, followed by a punishing left cross. The Australian stumbled, her confidence visibly cracking. The final moments of the fight were nothing short of poetic justice. Kim, sensing her opponent's desperation, began picking her apart systematically. A vicious shot to the liver sent Qasim reeling, exposing just how fragile her toughness really was. Kim stalked her mercilessly, every punch carrying the weight of a lesson being taught. The once loud Australian, who entered the fight full of arrogance, now found herself barely able to stand. Here's a clear example of why actors and fake martial arts masters should stay far away from real professionals. What was supposed to be a friendly exhibition match turned into an absolute disgrace. Muay Thai legend Buakaw Banchamek stepped into the ring against a Chinese actor who calls himself a kung fu master. But instead of showcasing martial arts, the audience witnessed chaos, dirty tactics, and a full-blown scandal. Buakaw isn't just a fighter, he's an icon of combat sports. A K1 champion with over 300 fights under his belt, he's dedicated his life to real fighting, not choreographed movie stunts. Yet he was asked to face Yan Lung, a Chinese actor hyped up as some kind of unbeatable kung fu warrior with shocking techniques. In reality, his few wins came against unknown opponents, and his style was a bizarre mix of theatrics and rule-breaking. He headbutted opponents, stepped on them while they were down, and pretended to be an invincible fighter. But the moment he stepped in with a true pro, his mask slipped. Right from the start, Yan Lung went wild, throwing an illegal knee strike early in the fight and constantly aiming near or directly at Buakaw's groin. He tried to pass it off as aggressive kung fu, but Buakaw, a seasoned warrior, initially tolerated it, clearly expecting the show match to end soon. However, when yet another spinning move nearly caused serious injury, Buakaw decided he'd had enough. He shifted into real fighter mode, delivering one clean, devastating knee to the body, and instantly knocked the toughness out of Yan Lung. The so-called master dropped the act, immediately whining to the referee and demanding the rules be changed mid-fight. What's funny is that the referee didn't even understand the complaint. He just waved to resume the fight, not noticing that Kung Fu Panda had sulked off to the corner, offended. He even claimed he didn't know knees were allowed. Promoters spent half an hour trying to convince Yan Lung to continue. He kept playing the victim. The actor who had been so hyped in the media ended up a laughingstock. The crowd booed him, and his kung fu couldn't survive even a few seconds against a real warrior. On the screen, it wasn't some special effect. The fighter's head looked like it had blown up into a balloon, but before the fight, she looked completely different. Her name is Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the former UFC strawweight queen. She stepped into the octagon to challenge the reigning champion, Zhang Weili. "I'll make you respect the queen. I'll force you to bow down this Sunday." "Shut up! I'll shut you up with my fists." That was the energy going in. Two warriors with pride on the line, and Joanna, the queen, started bright. She immediately took control of the cage, standing tall in the center and peppering Zhang with sharp, precise shots from a safe distance. Every strike carried venom, and every step forward pushed the champion into retreat. Her brilliant game plan shut down the champion's movement, draining her cardio and confidence little by little. By the end of the opening round, Zhang was so battered that her coach practically had to carry her back to the corner, while the crowd roared in shock at what they had just witnessed. But champions are champions for a reason. By the third round, Zhang went all in. She bit down on her mouthpiece, abandoned caution, and the fight turned into a brutal war of attrition. Zhang missed often, swinging wild, but when she landed, the impact echoed through the arena. Joanna, at first, smiled through the exchanges, almost mocking the danger, as if to say, "Is this really all you've got?" But 5 minutes later, there was no more smiling. Her forehead was swelling rapidly, mutating into something grotesque, a balloon that seemed ready to burst at any second. It wasn't just damage, it was the kind of injury that made the entire arena gasp every time the camera zoomed in. Yet Joanna kept fighting, taunting Zhang between exchanges, accusing her of not understanding what true championship fights were and of not deserving the belt. The irony was cruel. By the final bell, Joanna, the queen, the veteran, the proud warrior, looked like she might float away from the arena, carried not by victory, but by her own balloon-shaped head. The crowd knew they had just witnessed something unforgettable, one of the greatest wars in the history of women's MMA. And though only one left with the belt, both left with scars that would be remembered forever. The wife and son of the boxer can't hold back their tears. They sit ringside, overwhelmed with despair and fear, watching as their husband and father, the head of the family, takes brutal, relentless punches. Blood runs down his face, his legs buckle, but he still stands, fighting with everything he has. His name is Miguel Cotto, a champion, the pride of Puerto Rico, a man of honor. The referee steps in, technical knockout. The victory goes to Antonio Margarito. Cotto has lost, but it's not just a fight he's lost. It's something deeper, trust. Faith in the fairness of the sport he gave his life to. His family is in tears, the fans are in shock, and Cotto, battered and broken, quietly walks away from the ring. He doesn't yet know that he didn't lose to a man. but to a cheater. Time passes. Before Margarito's next fight, this time against Shane Mosley, something strange happens. Mosley's team demands a rewrap of Margarito's hands. And in the locker room, they discover pads soaked in a hardening substance, which turns to plaster as it dries. This isn't just cheating, it's criminal. The boxing world is stunned. Everyone remembers the fight with Cotto. Back then, Margarito landed over 200 punches, possibly using those very same plaster-loaded wraps. Those punches destroyed Cotto's face. Blood poured, his nose and mouth were shattered, and by the end, Cotto dropped to one knee. Not because he gave up, but because his body couldn't take anymore. All the legends came to see their fight against Mosley, because 37-year-old Shane was a real veteran of martial arts, a legend on par with the world's biggest stars, but he was already written off by the audience because of his age. Everyone was rooting for him. No one believed in him. The young cardio machine Antonio, according to forecasts, would easily take out the veteran, if not for this incident 2 hours before the fight. Naturally, he was not allowed to fight with such a bandage, and it was converted to a classic format. It's scary to imagine what the written-off veteran did to him in the ring. It was punishment for deceiving the entire boxing industry. Despite a difficult divorce from his wife just a week before the fight, Mosley left Margarito no chance. Years later, Cotto gets a rematch. Before the fight, Margarito mocks him. He hits like a girl. I'll beat him again. But this time, everything is fair. No illegal wraps, just fists and truth. From the opening bell, Cotto makes it clear, this is a different fight. Every punch he throws is sharp, powerful, full of purpose. He isn't just boxing, he's delivering justice. Round by round, he dissects Margarito. Then, it happens. Margarito's right eye begins to close. It's the same eye that was previously injured. Doctors monitor him closely, but by the 10th round, the eye is completely shut. He can't see. The fight is stopped. Victory for Miguel Cotto. This time, Miguel's wife is crazy with joy, which cannot be said about Antonio's wife. Margarito's eye never recovered, due to which this fight became the last in his career. After a long time, he had 3 more fights, but never returned to the professional ring. A boxer who crossed every line imaginable ultimately ended up hospitalized and spent 12 days in a coma, Shannon Briggs. In the lead-up to his bout against the reigning WBC champion Vladimir Klitschko, Briggs literally stalked him, showing up uninvited to training sessions, provoking scandals, yelling insults, disrupting the training process, and attempting to start fights.
Special guest. That's right! Not you. You're special now.
He tried to present himself as a threat, an unstoppable force unafraid of rules or consequences.
I'm gonna make you eat after that shoe, that t-shirt as well. Yes. What else? What else is gonna come up now? Oh really? I'm gonna eat your face.
His actions were calculated to throw Vladimir off balance, both mentally and emotionally. But he underestimated the Ukrainian's character.
Let's go, champ! Let's go, champ! Let's go, champ! That's right! The real champ!
One of the most outrageous scenes took place in an ordinary cafe. Vladimir was calmly having lunch with friends when suddenly Briggs burst into the room. He began acting like a madman, shouting, bragging, and then shamelessly eating food from Klitschko's plate. In response, the champion simply and gentlemanly poured a glass of water over his head. The crowd applauded him for the composure, the humor, the dignity. But Briggs wouldn't stop. The next act of this absurd theater happened in the ocean. Klitschko was surfing, enjoying some leisure time, when suddenly a speedboat rushed toward him. Behind the wheel, Briggs. He created waves on purpose, deliberately causing disruptions. And as a result, Klitschko was knocked into the water. It seemed Briggs truly saw himself not as a fighter, but as the main villain in some kind of sports reality show.
Everywhere you go, I go. Now you see me, I'm everywhere, baby. Everywhere you go, I go. Everything you do, I do. I'm the champ, and you the chump.
The game was over. Finally, the day of the fight arrived. And if Briggs thought he could continue his aggressive psychological warfare in the ring, he was gravely mistaken. Because Vladimir Klitschko, despite his calm and intellectual image, had prepared a true punishment for him. The fight lasted all 12 rounds, and they were, perhaps, the most painful 36 minutes of Shannon Briggs' life. Klitschko landed over 300 precise punches, each calculated, each deliberate. Briggs, in response, managed to land only about 70, none of which posed any real threat. Vladimir maintained distance, controlled the pace, and every Briggs attack broke against his perfect defense and instant counters. When the final bell rang, Briggs' face was already unrecognizable. He was hospitalized immediately after the fight. The diagnoses shocked even experienced doctors. Multiple facial bone fractures, severe hematomas, a torn bicep in his left arm. He spent 12 days in a coma, recovering from the consequences of his own recklessness. A professional judoka, known for his loud statements, decided to prove that no village strongman could compare to him. He walked onto the stage like it was a UFC press conference, with a smug smile, provocative gestures, and loud words. "You're not on my level. What can I say? I'm gonna win no matter what." He didn't just talk, he provoked, he pushed, grabbed his opponent's shoulder, shouted right in his face, trying to get under his skin. He even snatched a plastic bottle from the table and theatrically tossed it toward the arm wrestler. The crowd buzzed, cameras catching every moment. It looked like a hype stunt, but the arm wrestler stayed silent. He didn't respond to the insults, only smirked slightly, as if he already knew how this would end. He understood. Strength is proven by action, not words. The match began. From the very first seconds, it was clear. Akimbo, the strongman's name, didn't know any judo techniques. But his arms, they weren't arms, they were hydraulic clamps. And when the judoka tried to execute a throw, Akimbo locked his grip so tight it felt like he was holding a steel beam. At that moment, the cocky fighter realized this grip wasn't going to break. His technique, speed, and experience all hit a wall of immovable, unshakable power. He hesitated, blamed a bad start, and asked for a rematch. "Still ready to continue?" Akimbo asked with a faint smirk. "Of course I am," the judoka replied, trying to save face in front of the crowd. But the second attempt ended the same way. The arm wrestler's power, composure, and confidence once again put the loudmouth in his place. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Akimbo simply released the grip and said quietly, "Sometimes it's better to talk less." They wrestled a couple more times for the sake of the audience and Stepanov's ego, but each attempt ended the same way. As they say, you can't overcome a cobra's chokehold with judo experience alone. Nevertheless, the show was a success. It was truly a beautiful spectacle. The UFC practically threw up their hands trying to find an opponent for this fighter. Almost nobody wanted to face him inside the octagon, not because he was some unstoppable knockout artist or a wild brawler, but because his style was so awkward and unusual that it turned every fight into pure suffering for his rivals. Ryan Hall, the master of the ground game and the king of leg locks. His tactics looked painfully one-dimensional, but they were brutally effective. In every fight, he would cling to his opponents like glue, drag them to the canvas, and methodically twist their limbs. Even seasoned fighters with black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu couldn't handle the web of his submissions. One former UFC champion, considered a true wizard of grappling, found himself helpless and tapped in just seconds. Hall seemed to live for these moments, patiently waiting, then suddenly latching onto a leg and finishing the fight before anyone realized what happened. And so, when it seemed impossible to find him an opponent, Dana White could do nothing but shrug. That's when he appeared, a young predator of Georgian descent, raised in Spain by the name of Ilia Topuria. It was only his third fight in the promotion, yet he already looked like a future champion. Confident, fearless, with iron will and knockout power in his hands, he was ready to silence the so-called floor wiper of the UFC. The vast majority of fans were convinced Hall would do what he always did. He'd dive for the legs, drag the fight down, and eventually force another tap. But the question remained, how do you knock out someone who barely fights on the feet and lives on the ground? Few knew the answer, but Topuria was one of them. He didn't rush. He patiently waited for Hall to make that one mistake, chasing the leg lock like always. And when the moment came, Topuria pounced. He entered Hall's own world, the ground, and began pounding him mercilessly, turning the grappler's submission hunt into a desperate struggle to survive. His punches were so heavy and precise that the crowd erupted to their feet. Ryan Hall was literally overshadowed by the arrival of Topuria, for whom it was only his third fight, and Hall's career seemed ruined. This guy looked like he had just broken out of a padded cell. Julian Lane, the kind of fighter whose aggression boils inside him like steam in a pressure cooker. He's never been able to keep his emotions in check. One moment he's crying at a press conference, the next he's swinging fists at anyone in range, and sometimes he shows up in a suit and tie like a perfectly normal man. But once the cage door shuts, he transforms into an uncontrollable madman. And tonight, Leonard Garcia was the one tasked with handling him. For Garcia, it felt less like a fight and more like a special forces mission to take down a dangerous patient. Round one. The bell rang, and Lane charged forward like he wanted to tear Garcia apart with his bare hands. Wild hooks, looping punches, charging into the clinch with short uppercuts. He fought like chaos itself. Garcia tried to calm the storm with stiff jabs aiming to slow Lane's pace, but pain only seemed to fuel Julian's madness. Late in the round, Lane exploded with a 5-punch flurry, trapping Garcia against the fence. Leonard pivoted out at the last second and cracked him with a clean right hand that made Lane stumble. Round two, Lane came out pressing again. But now, Garcia was reading him like a book. He intercepted the rushes with sharp counters, mixing in body shots that started to sap Lane's energy. A few desperate takedown attempts were stuffed, and on the break, Garcia smashed elbows into Lane's guard. Lane went berserk, swinging at air, missing wildly. In the closing minute, Garcia poured on combinations to the body and head, forcing the madman to slow down. Lane, exhausted but still dangerous, went all in. He clipped Garcia with a right hand that opened a cut, but Leonard answered with a crushing hook that stopped him in his tracks. Garcia followed up with a right overhand, pinned Lane to the cage, and unleashed a barrage. The referee watched closely, and when Lane stopped firing back, he stepped in to wave it off. Leonard Garcia proved that even the most dangerous lunatic can be neutralized. Lane, swaying on his feet, still looked like he couldn't tell whether the fight had ended, or if they were really sending him back to the ward. Former world champion Orlin Norris is escorted out of the ring to furious shouts. "Coward, damn idiot, rotten coward, little bitch!" Thus ended one of the strangest fights in Mike Tyson's career.
This bout is officially ruled at this time a no contest.
But what exactly made the crowd so furious? To understand that, we need to go back 2 years. What did Tyson do? He bit him. After the infamous ear-biting incident with Evander Holyfield, it seemed that Mike's career was permanently tarnished, but he was eager to return and wash away the shame. And so, in 1999, Tyson stepped into the ring again, focused, aggressive, and ready to show the best boxing of his life. The arena was packed with 11,000 spectators and dozens of celebrities. Everyone was waiting for the grand return of Iron Mike. His opponent, Orlin Norris, a former cruiserweight world champion, a veteran with 50 wins under his belt, and a reputation as a tough counterpuncher. He had moved up to heavyweight for the chance to test himself against Tyson. The opening bell of the first round rings. Mike immediately comes forward, fast, charged, but surprisingly composed. Norris stands his ground, controls the center of the ring, and tries to catch Tyson coming in. Midway through the round, the fighters exchange quick flurries, Tyson snapping his jab and ripping hooks to the body, Norris answering with sharp counters, neither man giving an inch. The tension in the arena is electric, every movement drawing gasps from the crowd. Several times, the referee warns Mike for punches after breaking the clinch, but he seems not to notice. Then, in the final seconds of the round, the bell sounds. For most fighters, that's the signal to stop, but not for Mike. A short left uppercut, and Norris goes down to the canvas. He gets up on his own, but limps to the corner, telling his cornerman, "My knee's injured." The doctors see swelling and suspect a dislocated kneecap, but the crowd isn't buying it. The stands erupt in boos. Instead of a triumphant return, a new scandal is born.
How could a blow to the jaw hurt his knee?
The fight thousands had been waiting for ended before it even began. After eating a brutal combination, this fighter was just seconds away from defeat. The crowd could sense it. They were already leaning forward, waiting for the referee to step in. But what happened next shocked the entire arena and left even the commentators speechless. It was a moment that proved once again that a fight isn't over until the very last bell. Jason Solomon, stepping into the cage against the overly confident Amit Kumar, thought he was ready for anything. But Kumar came in with bad intentions. From the very first exchange, he refused to show any respect. Solomon wasn't impressed. He chopped down Kumar's lead leg with a vicious low kick, letting him know this wouldn't be a free ride. That moment of defiance didn't last long. Two thunderous hooks smashed into Solomon's jaw, followed by a picture-perfect uppercut that snapped his head back and sent him stumbling. The lights were dimming. Look closely at his face. That distant, glassy stare told the whole story. But the nightmare had only just begun. Kumar smelled blood in the water and turned into a relentless hunter. He stalked Solomon across the cage, cutting off every escape, firing bombs with bad intentions. In just 2 minutes, Solomon was knocked down 5 times, each one looking like it would be the last. The crowd gasped with every fall. Most fighters would have given up right there, but not Solomon. He wasn't just fighting for a win. He was fighting for his pride, for his name, for the right to stand tall when everything was crumbling around him. With the heart of a lion, battered and exhausted, he kept getting back up. His legs were gone, his body was failing him, but his spirit refused to break. And then, just when Kumar thought he had him finished, he made a fatal mistake. After wearing his knuckles raw from pounding Solomon's face, Kumar decided it would be easier to finish the job on the ground. He closed the distance, looking to drag the fight down and end it once and for all, but he never saw what was coming next. In one explosive moment, Solomon reversed the position, snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, and sent the arena into chaos. The same crowd that was moments away from watching him lose now stood screaming his name, witnessing one of the most incredible comebacks in MMA history. It's terrifying to watch throws like that. Just one look at his face, and you know soft mats didn't save it. The fighter who did this to the poor guy on your screen, he's no ordinary man. His name is Quinton Jackson. Everyone who found themselves in the same room with him, they kept their distance. The only man who ever dared to joke around with him was Dana White himself.
You know what sucks about that? It shows everybody how cheap our doors are.
But in the MMA world, they call him Rampage for a reason, because sometimes it felt like he wasn't just fighting, he was losing his mind. It was hard to tell whether he was playing it up for the crowd or if he was just a real lunatic. But his throws, God, those throws, each one looked like a car crash at 50 miles per hour. You watch them flinch by flinch, even when you know the outcome. It's like half his opponents needed a neurosurgeon after the fight. At one point, he even defeated the seemingly unbeatable Kevin Randleman. And while his slams were already the stuff of nightmares, his striking was just as terrifying. Faster, heavier, meaner. And sure, this kind of slam, yeah, you can survive it. Might need a neck brace, but you'll live. Together, these skills made it feel like Rampage was unstoppable. And for a while, he really was. But this one got burned into people's memory. In the ring, Masaki Satake, a seasoned karateka from Japan. Tough, battle-tested. Rampage slammed him once, and Satake smiled, as if to say, hey, not bad, I've been thrown harder. Big mistake, because Rampage doesn't take that kind of disrespect. His next move, he launched Satake like a rag doll, slamming him into the mat with a sound so brutal. Even the crowd clenched their jaws. The ref was the only man who could have saved the karateka. But at that moment, even he froze. After that throw, no one was laughing. Even Satake realized, with this man, you don't joke around, because Rampage isn't pretending. He really is the rage. But who, after all, managed to beat him?
He beat the best me ever. Nobody ever faced me like that. I was in the best shape.
Quinton didn't see John Jones as a real threat. He laughed at Jones's serious demeanor. He even admitted he was so confident in victory, it felt like only a miracle could help Jones win.
And I trained my ass off, and I was like overly confident. I'm like, I've never lost a fight being this good shape. I'm like, I'm gonna destroy this kid.
At first, Jones started using a strange tactic that annoyed Jackson. But from that moment on, Jackson realized that something unusual was going on. Jones was doing what no one had ever done to Jackson. And from that moment, the fight was taking on a legendary character. He was simply mocking Quinton's aggression, like playing with a wild lion. The whole fight looked like a separate genre of art, and it was so fascinating to watch that the audience stood up. Jones was like a fly that couldn't be caught. By the end, nothing had changed. Jackson was the clear underdog. In the fourth round, the humiliation ended. Rampage was exhausted and could no longer put up a fight, and Jones beautifully finished the bout with his victory.
Most of my opponent is bigger than me, but I beat them all, so I'm not worried about that.
That was Manny Pacquiao's mindset when he faced Keith Thurman, a man who believed he could humiliate a legend. Thurman talked endlessly before the fight, mocking the 40-year-old senator.
I believe I would have destroyed Manny Pacquiao 5 years ago when he was with Top Ranks.
I already said he's got these T-Rex arms. Manny Pacquiao, T-Rex arms. Pop, pop, pop. Can you stop this, man? Of course.
But Thurman made one fatal mistake. From the opening bell, Pacquiao exploded, knocked the trash talker down. Pacquiao's left hand thundered through Thurman's guard, sending him stumbling to the canvas, eyes wide, realizing this was no farewell fight. The crowd erupted. Pacquiao wasn't here to survive. He was here to teach a lesson. Rounds 2 through 5 were pure intensity. Thurman tried to rally, using his youth, footwork, and combinations, but Pacquiao's speed and angles kept slicing through him. The senator's jab snapped Thurman's head back again and again, and every exchange ended with Pacquiao landing the last punch. Thurman's face showed the damage, but his pride kept him in the fight. By round 6, Thurman knew he had to change something. He began pressing forward, unleashing combinations to the body and head. For the first time, Pacquiao slowed a little, giving the younger man room to work. In round 7, Thurman dug deep, pounding Pacquiao's ribs with vicious body shots, and you could feel the momentum shift. The legend was forced onto the back foot. It was now a war of attrition, youth against experience, fire against composure. The 9th round gave us one of the fight's most brutal moments. Pacquiao caught Thurman with a left to the liver, folding him in half. Thurman's mouthpiece almost flew out as he gasped for air, retreating with his hand pressed against his body. He survived, but the message was clear. Pacquiao's power was still lethal. When the final bell rang, by split decision, Manny Pacquiao's hand was raised. There was one fight where even Khabib's trademark pressure seemed under threat. The second toughest opponent of his career was Edson Barboza, a kicker whose strikes were considered among the scariest in the UFC. And it was he who managed to make Khabib angrier than almost anyone ever had. From the opening seconds, Nurmagomedov turned on his usual suffocating pressure. He closed the distance, cut off the cage, and didn't let his opponent breathe. Normally, fighters broke down within a couple of minutes, but Barboza refused to fold. He began meeting Khabib with hard shots, heavy leg kicks, and even raised the tempo. showing courage few dared. Then came a rare moment. One of Khabib's takedown attempts failed. It might seem like nothing, but it enraged him. His eyes lit up with irritation, and he even refused to touch gloves at the start of the round, completely consumed by anger. At first, Barboza looked confident. He smiled, acted calm as if to show everyone he was comfortable. But that mask quickly fell once Khabib finally got the takedown, locked in control, and unleashed a relentless storm of ground and pound. There were no pauses, no breathing room. Every strike landed not just on Barboza's body, but on his spirit, draining him moment by moment. By the end of the round, he stood back up, exhausted, and when the next round began, he moved slower. His strikes lost sharpness, his footwork grew heavy. He kept trying to answer back, but Nurmagomedov's pressure was merciless, like a steamroller that simply wouldn't stop moving forward. Still, his character remained. Near the end, Barboza almost deliberately went down to the ground, as if to prove to everyone he would endure everything, but he would never quit. That gesture struck a nerve with Khabib, who hated when opponents tried to play psychological games with him. Yes, the victory belonged to Nurmagomedov, but Barboza achieved something important. He survived the storm, made Khabib angry, and etched his name into history. And here's the question: if even a fighter like Barboza couldn't stop Khabib, could anyone? You've never seen anything like this before. He takes a shot so powerful that any other man would have collapsed instantly, yet somehow he remains standing. It isn't resilience, it isn't toughness. It's something far more dangerous: a fighter's body refusing to quit while his mind is already gone. His opponent screams in frustration at the referee, and for good reason, because on this night, the referee failed his job in the worst possible way. From the opening moments, Lutherbach set the tone with savage low kicks, smashing into Traceberg's lead leg with the precision of a blade. The German's stance began to crumble, his balance shaken. Then came the shift. Lutherbach targeted the head. Clean, accurate shots snapped Traceberg's skull back, each one more damaging than the last, and yet something was wrong. Traceberg's footwork looked broken, his reactions sluggish. He staggered, eyes glassy, his body moving without coordination, as if he no longer fully understood where he was. Any seasoned referee would have recognized the signs immediately. Fighters hide pain, but they cannot hide confusion. Traceberg was lost in that ring, and everyone watching could see it. Everyone except the man who mattered most, the referee. Lutherbach noticed it. He landed a straight right, then glanced toward the official with desperation, silently pleading, "Stop this fight." The response? Nothing. The referee's cold expression betrayed no concern. No doctor was called, no intervention made. The fight dragged on, and Traceberg continued to eat clean, unanswered strikes. Each punch was no longer just competition. It was punishment, and it was needless. Lutherbach, despite being the aggressor, looked almost unwilling to throw again. But he had no choice. And then, the inevitable. A final crushing combination sent Traceberg collapsing to the canvas, his body lifeless before it even touched the ground. The knockout was brutal, decisive, but it was also unnecessary. The fight should have been stopped long before that moment. When it was over, the truth was undeniable. This wasn't just a knockout. This was a failure of duty, a nightmare that could have ended far worse. Lutherbach got his victory, but it came with a shadow.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay.
This man made the mistake of his life when, out of nowhere, he slapped his opponent across the face without a shred of reason. A cheap shot, a blatant act of disrespect. But that wasn't even the most outrageous thing he did. First came the slap, then the broken banana stunt, a humiliating display meant to mock his rival before a single punch was even thrown. And with that, the fight was no longer just a contest. It became a personal vendetta. Remember this face, the face of the villain. Because on this night, Ryan Jett proved himself a master at absorbing punishment with nothing but his chin. As soon as the bell rang, his arrogance met cold reality. Hawkins, fueled by rage, flipped a switch and unleashed a storm. He cut off the cage, pressed Jett against the ropes, and hammered him with ruthless, bone-crushing combinations. Each strike landed with violent precision, sending shockwaves through the crowd as Jett's head snapped back again and again. The punishment mounted quickly. Jett's face began to swell, bruises spreading like wildfire, blood leaking from his nose. Hawkins showed no mercy. Every time Jett tried to respond, his punches sailed wide, his timing broken, his confidence shattered. Out of desperation, Jett tried once more to humiliate his opponent, throwing another open-hand slap in the middle of the chaos. But instead of slowing Hawkins, it ignited something deeper. It was like pouring gasoline on a fire. Hawkins' eyes burned with vengeance. The crowd roared as Hawkins dismantled him piece by piece, breaking not just his body, but his pride. Jett, who had entered the ring as the aggressor, was now a battered shell, cornered and unable to escape the storm he had unleashed. By the later rounds, Jett's face was hardly recognizable, a grotesque mask of swelling, bruises, and blood. The humiliation he had tried to inflict had come back tenfold. In the final exchange, Hawkins targeted the eye mercilessly, and with one last barrage, the referee had no choice but to wave it off. The ringside doctor confirmed it. Severe eye damage. The fight was over. It was a brutal ending, a merciless punishment for arrogance. Even undefeated champions have moments when the whole world holds its breath in fear for them. Thousands of spectators, the team in panic. That's exactly how the fight looked when, for the first time, people were truly afraid for Khabib. From the very beginning, both fighters looked extremely cautious. Dustin and Khabib were testing the distance, but barely a minute passed before Khabib turned on his trademark style. Relentless pressure, constant forward drive, a suffocating pace. He kept pushing ahead, giving his opponent not a single second to rest. And that was when Dustin first experienced what pressure without pause really means. In the second round, it became clear. Dustin wasn't planning to give up. He absorbed shots, kept moving, firing back, and discovered something unexpected. Khabib was not easy to knock out. Nurmagomedov was taking more hits than usual, and the crowd began to roar. At some point, it seemed like he was really losing control, but Khabib's face stayed stone cold. No fear, no panic, as if nothing had happened. The arena exploded with every strike Dustin landed. Khabib kept moving forward despite the shots he absorbed, but Khabib's father calmly watched and raised his finger, a silent sign that there was no need to panic. And then came the climax, the third round. A mistake, and Dustin jumped on Khabib's neck. A choke attempt. The crowd erupted. Millions of viewers froze. Nurmagomedov's team was in panic. Everyone realized this could be the end, but only one man remained absolutely calm: his father. He had no doubt his son would handle it, and he was right. Khabib survived, broke free, and escaped the most dangerous situation of his career. This fight became a symbol that Khabib is not just a champion. He is a man with iron will, cold-blooded composure, and the unshakable confidence instilled in him by his father. That moment showed the whole world. Even when it seems there's no chance, Nurmagomedov will always find a way to win. He is one of the best fighters of our time, but when you look at his appearance, the first impression many people have is just a smirk. Skinny, lanky, awkward, not the image we usually associate with a knockout machine. He's exactly the kind of guy kids laugh at in school, but the irony is that guys like this are the ones who later step into the ring, and with a single punch, shut everyone up. At the very start of his career, he was already knocking people out in spectacular fashion, leaving opponents lying on the floor. And back then, many started to wonder, would you dare laugh at him now? But there's always someone who underestimates. That's exactly what happened this time. A confident professional decided to take the risk.
Ребята, в субботу я побью его. Вы посмотрите на его вид, это как девушка с дороги, я не знаю.
He was so blinded by arrogance that he forgot one simple truth. The fight is decided inside the cage, not in the press conference. So, is it still funny to you? It was funny to Sean, too, at the start of the fight. He stepped into the cage full of confidence, even went into a wild exchange, trying to show his grit. The crowd roared, anticipating a fiery clash. But all it takes is one blink, and everything changes. Sean, despite all the blows life had thrown his way, kept proving that his fights were something truly special. No wonder so many of his bouts were awarded Fight of the Night. And one of those fights was against Khashoggian. Fans didn't just come for the result. They came for the show, the raw energy, that one-of-a-kind feeling where you simply can't take your eyes off the screen. At first, Khashoggian doubted Sean's power, but how wrong he was. And soon he realized it. That night, Sean didn't just win. He shattered every stereotype about himself. The crowd, once full of doubt, was now on its feet, chanting his name. He walked out of the cage a true triumphant, leaving his opponent and all the doubters in silence. A lot of people keep saying Islam lost, but if you break the fight down round by round, the picture looks completely different. The first round was tense. By significant strikes, it was 3-2 for Islam. To the crowd, it looked like Leko was relaxed, smiling, almost mocking his opponent as if everything was under control. In reality, the smiles were just hiding the growing pressure. In the second round, Islam turned it up and imposed his trademark pace, the kind of pace his opponents can rarely survive. On the feet, he was sharper, 2-0 in clean strikes. On the ground, it was total dominance, control, position, pressure. Leko tried to scramble, but every attempt ended with him stuck back on the mat. No doubt here, a clear round for Islam. The third round went 3-1 in Islam's favor, and this is where many debates started. The judges, for some strange reason, counted little pokes on the same level as hard, damaging shots. But how can you compare a punch that takes the wind out of you to a light touch with the fingers? Obviously, in terms of real damage, Islam was ahead once again. In the fourth, Leica leaned on tricks. He landed some strikes, including a low blow, and kept throwing pokes from the ground. From Islam's corner came the advice, hit back in those exchanges, otherwise you might give away the round on points. And that's when Leica's smile faded. Islam, like a python, controlled the fight with cold precision, not letting him rise, smothering every move. The fifth round was the ultimate test. Islam started perfectly, 4-0 in strikes. His accuracy and control were on point, but at the end, he did eat 2 shots and ended up on the mat. The crowd exploded, not enough to steal the round. That round still belonged to Islam. When you sum it up, 3 rounds clearly for Islam, 2 could be considered even. The result? A confident win. And now the big question for those saying Islam lost. Did you actually watch the fight or just the highlights? This Japanese fighter decided to fight dirty. While holding his opponent's leg, he struck the supporting one, right on the kneecap, a move clearly forbidden by the rules. For a moment, the crowd gasped, realizing what had just happened. Now look closely at his opponent's face. That expression says it all. Nothing good awaits him, because he had just angered the Muay Thai legend Buakaw Banchamek, a man who chops down palm trees with his shins like an axe, and has recorded more than 240 professional victories across his career. Buakaw is more than just a fighter. He is the pride of Thailand, a 2-time K1 World Max champion, a man who turned the ancient art of Muay Thai into a global spectacle, known for his terrifying low kicks, suffocating clinch, and unmatched mental toughness. Buakaw built his legacy by breaking the spirit of those who dared to challenge him. The Japanese fighter's name is Takayuki Kohiruimaki, a Kyokushin karate black belt. His background made him dangerous, disciplined, sharp, and tough. But even with all that experience, he crossed the line with a move that could have ended Buakaw's career. That illegal kick threatened fractures, ligament tears, or a devastating injury. But instead of breaking Buakaw, it lit a fire inside him. What followed was punishment on a completely different level. With the words, "God may forgive, but I will not," Buakaw turned those minutes in the ring into a nightmare for Takayuki. He started slow, methodically chopping away the legs of his opponent with bone-crushing low kicks. Each strike echoed like a drumbeat through the arena, and with every shot, Takayuki's mobility disappeared. His stance weakened, his balance crumbled, and his face revealed the pain he could no longer hide. When Buakaw closed the distance, the destruction escalated. He locked Kohiruimaki into his infamous Muay Thai clinch, and from there, the end was inevitable. The knees came crashing in, one after another, with merciless precision. Takayuki dropped into knockdowns multiple times, struggling to rise, only to be dragged back into the storm. The crowd erupted at every knee that landed, sensing they were witnessing not just a beating, but a lesson in pure dominance. By the final sequence, Takayuki's body was betraying him. His guard was slow, his legs barely held him, and every time Buakaw's knee struck, it looked like the fight should already be over. Finally, after yet another devastating knee left the Japanese fighter folded and defenseless, the referee showed compassion where Buakaw would not. He stepped in, waving off the fight, sparing Takayuki from further destruction. The cruelty of this fighter knows no bounds. His opponent had already given up, yet he continued to cold-bloodedly attack with punches and kicks. Drunk on his own success, this arrogant fool shamelessly revealed his animalistic nature. His name is Jason Solomon, and this was not the first time he behaved disgracefully. After one of his victories, he even kicked his beaten opponent in the back and always got away with it. The Indian fighter kept winning, often by stoppage. To him, the cage wasn't a place of fair competition, but a stage to humiliate opponents and boost his fame. Then Solomon got the chance to fight for a vacant championship belt in a local league. The script seemed already written. Humble Amitesh Chubey was expected to be just another victim, a punching bag Jason would crush and humiliate. Tall, long-armed, and full of swagger, Solomon entered the cage like a jungle king, presented with a helpless lamb for breakfast. His walk, gestures, and arrogant stare screamed defiance. He basked in the crowd's attention, looking as if the belt was already in his hands. His young opponent behaved very differently. Chubey didn't even glance at the provocateur strutting around the cage. But inside, a fire burned. He knew this was the opportunity of his life and was ready to prove himself. As soon as the bell rang, Amitesh showed his skill. Solomon came out cocky and aggressive, firing a jab to seize control. But this time, his arrogance betrayed him. Chubey slipped the punch, read the movement instantly, and unleashed a brutal overhand counter. Crowd erupted. No one expected the newcomer to put the Jungle King in his place so quickly. Solomon, stunned by the blow, didn't even have time to react. The strike was flawless. Heavy, sharp, precise. In an instant, the self-proclaimed predator became the prey. His kingdom collapsed before the crowd's eyes. In just 8 seconds, the arrogant showman crashed to the canvas, and Amitesh Choubey proved that true power lies not in showboating, but in skill and determination.
Talking about what a job by Sims. Can't touch it down the opponent. That's not cannot.
He looked less like a professional fighter and more like an unhinged street brawler. In the middle of a sanctioned UFC fight, Wes Sims did something that shocked everyone watching. His opponent wasn't just some random heavyweight, it was Frank Mir, one of the most feared grapplers in the sport, a man who would go on to become UFC heavyweight champion and break the arms of elite opponents inside the octagon. Early in the fight, Mir quickly dragged Sims to the ground and transitioned into an armbar. His jiu-jitsu was world-class, and it looked like Sims had no answers. But instead of relying on skill or discipline, Sims chose chaos. He suddenly lifted Mir, slammed him to the mat, and then unleashed one of the dirtiest moves in UFC history. With Mir lying defenseless, Sims stomped on his head. Not once, not twice, but 5 brutal stomps straight to the face. The arena erupted in disbelief. Even in the wild early days of MMA, this kind of foul was unthinkable. Fans booed loudly. Commentators could barely believe what they were witnessing, and the referee had no choice but to step in. Sims was immediately disqualified. The fight was awarded to Mir, but it didn't feel satisfying. For Mir, it wasn't enough. He wanted revenge inside the rules, to prove beyond any doubt who the better fighter really was. And a year later, he got that chance. The UFC booked the rematch, and from the opening bell, it was clear that Frank Mir was on a mission. He showcased his elite grappling, executing a smooth takedown and transitioning with surgical precision. At one point, he even locked in a choke attempt, forcing Sims to scramble frantically just to breathe. But Mir was in full control, calmly breaking his opponent down piece by piece, showing the difference between raw aggression and refined skill. When they returned to the feet, Mir shifted gears. 2 vicious knees smashed into Sims's midsection, instantly taking the air out of him. A sharp right hand landed clean, wobbling Sims, and then Mir detonated the finishing blow. A thunderous left hook that sent the bigger man crashing to the canvas. The crowd erupted, this time in celebration. No controversy, no dirty fouls, just a spectacular and decisive knockout. A gesture of respect that turned into humiliation. Before the opening bell, Donald "Cowboy" Cerrone extended his hand to Matt Brown, offering a sign of sportsmanship. But instead of returning the gesture, Brown stared coldly and ignored him in front of the entire crowd. It wasn't just a refusal, it was a message, a public dismissal, and the sting was felt even more deeply because Cowboy had always been one of the most positive athletes in the UFC, a man far from trash talk or dirty antics. For Cerrone, fighting was never about hatred. He built his career on grit, respect, and entertainment. With his wild, brawling style and unmatched willingness to fight anyone, anywhere, anytime, he became a fan favorite, racking up highlight finishes across multiple divisions. But that night, Matt Brown didn't see a beloved veteran. He saw someone he believed was overrated, and he was determined to expose him. The bad blood was clear from the very first exchanges. Brown came forward with his signature aggression, putting Cowboy under pressure and landing clean shots. In the second round, he delivered a sharp combination that dropped Cerrone into a stunning knockdown. The arena gasped as Brown swarmed in, eager to finish the job. But Cowboy had been here before. He stayed calm, defended himself, and quickly fired back with precise counters that forced Brown to back off. And that became the rhythm of the fight. 2 seasoned warriors trading heavy leather, testing each other's durability, neither man willing to break. For 2 full rounds, they battered one another, trading kicks, elbows, and punches, leaving the octagon painted with the story of their rivalry. But then, something shifted. Before the start of the 3rd round, both men paused. The tension that had built up over weeks suddenly seemed to fade. Brown finally extended his glove, and Cowboy accepted. The crowd roared as the 2 warriors buried the hatchet and touched hands. Respect had finally been earned the hard way, not through words, but through war. And then came the ending. In a moment of poetic justice, Cowboy, the man who had been disrespected at the start, delivered the ultimate response.
And by Cowboy.
A devastating head kick that landed flush on Brown's jaw. The arena erupted. What began as humiliation ended as redemption. Cowboy Cerrone, the man who fought with heart and respect, had the final word, not with trash talk, but with his shin. The whole world was waiting for this on August 16th. The fate of the UFC middleweight title was decided. It currently belonged to Duplessis, who had already defended his belt 3 times. But now his path was blocked for the first time by a fighter from Dagestan, the new challenger, Khamzat Chimaev. Whoever it might have been, facing the Chechen fighter was like a nightmare. Just look at his trademark stare. Chimaev tore through everyone in his path like a hurricane, and not without consequences. For example, he literally broke Robert Whittaker's jaw by crushing it, forcing him to immediately surrender. And afterward, the dentist had to simply remove his teeth. And Whittaker, by the way, was the former holder of this very title. Joe Rogan commented on it like this: "He's terrifying. Whoever he grabs, he ragdolls them. Even elite wrestlers. Breaking Whitaker's jaw, his talent is undeniable. There's such a thing as trash talking, and Chimaev is one of those who actually does exactly what he says. Like in one of his early fights with Gerald Meerschaert, Chimaev promised to finish it with the first punch, and he really did. A 17-second knockout with a straight right. He had never gone to a final 5th round and still has no losses. Only once was his toughness truly tested, by Gilbert Burns back in 2020, when he knocked him down and seriously hurt him with punches. But the very fact that Chimaev endured it, fought through to the end, and still won shows everything. And what about Du Plessis? He was also undefeated and had beaten UFC legends like Adesanya, Strickland, and Perez. The fight began with Chimaev's trademark stare, followed by a takedown. From then on, it was all about ground control, and to everyone's surprise, it was completely one-sided in favor of Chimaev. Du Plessis was unrecognizable, showing absolute helplessness throughout the first round, though he later smiled it off. The crowd booed. They didn't like that Chimaev's style was, let's say, too boring. But Khamzat enjoyed everything. The fight was entirely in his element and on his terms. His techniques resembled Khabib's, using the crucifix position, and every attempt by Dricus to escape failed. That's how it went in the second round, the third, and the fourth. Just look at the scorecards at the end of round 4. It was absurd for a reigning champion who had defended the belt 3 times. Nearly 1,000 strikes from Chimaev, and what seemed like an absolute record in UFC for control and domination. It was surreal to see such a picture in a title fight. Only in the 5th round did Du Plessis try to keep his distance, but Chimaev was unstoppable. He collapsed into the abyss, and it was just a matter of one more round. Then suddenly Du Plessis started to act, trying to cheaply catch Khamzat and steal the initiative, but it just didn't work. At the end, the referee gave Du Plessis a chance, and it seemed to work, but there was no time left, and he couldn't do anything. At this point, Chimaev became the UFC middleweight champion, breaking an all-time record, 529 significant strikes, beating Max Holloway's previous record of 447, while still remaining undefeated. Although he represented the Emirates, he was born and most often resides in Russia. He became the first Chechen fighter to become a UFC champion. April 2001. The boxing world was shaken to its core by one of the most shocking moments in heavyweight history. The undisputed champion, Lennox Lewis, a man considered nearly untouchable, was brutally knocked out by underdog Hasim Rahman. Nobody saw it coming. Fans, experts, and even bookmakers were left speechless. Major outlets immediately crowned it the upset of the year, and the image of Lewis sprawled on the canvas spread like wildfire across the globe. For Lewis, it was more than just a loss. It was humiliation. Critics claimed he had underestimated Rahman, coming into the fight out of shape and unfocused. The new champion, meanwhile, reveled in the spotlight. In one night, Rahman went from relative obscurity to worldwide fame, enjoying his 15 minutes as the man who dethroned the giant. But Lewis was determined to set things right. He tried to exercise his rematch clause immediately, but Rahman refused. Flush with new attention, the fresh champion wanted to avoid risk and cash in on softer opponents. That's when Lewis took him to court, forcing the rematch. The bitterness only grew.
I said what he did was gay. I said he wanted to take it to the court, and we fighting around the same time. I told him we was gonna fight anyway.
Rahman lashed out with insults, calling Lewis gay for pushing the issue, a remark that crossed the line and added gasoline to their rivalry. When the two appeared together on live TV, words turned into chaos. Trash talk escalated into a full-on brawl, with two 240-pound heavyweights throwing punches and flipping tables. The studio was destroyed, and the world knew one thing: this rematch wasn't just business, it was deeply personal. The stage was set for one of the most anticipated fights of the decade. Fans weren't just waiting for a boxing match, they were waiting for vengeance, for a story to reach its climax. And Lewis delivered. Unlike their first encounter, he came in razor-sharp, disciplined, and prepared. He stuck behind his jab, kept his guard tight, and fought with patience. Rahman grew frustrated as his attempts to bully Lewis failed. Every miss, every jab snapping his head back, chipped away at his confidence. Then came the 4th round. The tension in the arena was unbearable. Suddenly, Lewis unleashed his greatest weapon, a thunderous, picture-perfect right hand. It detonated on Rahman's jaw with devastating precision. The challenger collapsed instantly, falling flat to the canvas. The crowd erupted as Rahman lay unconscious, staring at the ceiling lights. The referee didn't need to finish the count. Lennox Lewis had avenged his loss in the most spectacular way imaginable. Imagine this, a man lying unconscious, defenseless, his body limp on the canvas. And instead of respect, instead of stepping away, his opponent cruelly plants his foot right on his neck, a shocking, disgusting act that crossed every line of honor in martial arts. That victim was Ben Spikers, and the man responsible for this disgrace, none other than the legendary name in jiu-jitsu, Renzo Gracie. From the very start, Renzo fought not like a champion, but like a man possessed. He abandoned the rules, throwing brutal elbows straight to the back of Spikers' head. One of the dirtiest moves in combat sports. With calculated rage, he then wrapped his arms around Spikers' neck. The choke was tight, merciless. Ben resisted, clawed for air, but his body soon gave up. But Renzo refused to let go. He kept squeezing even after Spikers was out cold. The referee had to rip him off by force. And yet, the ugliest moment was still to come. As the crowd gasped, Renzo shoved the unconscious fighter aside, stood up arrogantly, looked down, and then stomped on Spikers' neck. Not by accident. The audience was stunned. This wasn't just unsportsmanlike, it was pure malice.
Renzo Gracie clearly in defeat.
And the worst part? Spikers never truly recovered. That night ended his career. A man who had trained his whole life, forced to walk away because of one opponent's cruelty. Renzo wasn't even disqualified. No suspension, no real punishment. Fans were furious. Across the MMA world, people cried for justice, waiting for the day someone would humble the arrogant Gracie. And finally, that day came. Dan Henderson, one of the toughest and most respected warriors in the sport, stood across the cage from Renzo. From the opening exchanges, Renzo's desperate takedown attempts were punished with Henderson's vicious knees. Each strike was greeted with roars from the crowd, as if every fan in the arena could feel justice being served. And then it happened. Henderson launched a brutal uppercut that detonated on Gracie's chin.
Well, that did land. Back down.
Renzo's body went limp, collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut. The crowd erupted into chaos. Justice had arrived, fast and merciless. That night, Renzo Gracie, who once mocked the values of honor and respect, was finally humbled. Khamzat Chimaev could hardly control his anger. Emotions were overflowing, and at one point he even broke a chair. The reason was simple. That evening, he was set to corner his own brother, Abubakar Vagayev. For Khamzat, this was not just another show, but a matter of honor and family pride. Abubakar had taken a bold step, moving up a weight class to try and capture a second championship belt and make history as a double champion. Across the cage stood a dangerous and determined opponent, former UFC fighter Albert Tumenov. In the past decade, his only loss had been to Leon Edwards, and that defeat had only made him sharper and more resilient. To intensify the rivalry, Tumenov had publicly claimed that he would easily beat Chimaev himself. Khamzat took those words as a direct insult, and the tension surrounding the match reached its absolute peak. From the opening seconds, it was clear Vagayev would impose his wrestling. He relentlessly pushed forward, chaining takedown attempts and denying Tumenov any space to unleash his striking. But constant pressure drained energy quickly, and by the middle of the third round, Abubakar began to slow down. His breathing grew heavier, his movements sluggish. The situation became even more dangerous when Tumenov landed a sharp, clean punch that broke his nose. Blood streamed down his face, and every strike brought searing pain, yet Abubakar refused to back down. In the championship rounds, Vagayev showed the true heart of a warrior. Digging deep, he executed takedowns with precision, controlled his opponent on the ground, and smothered every attempt at a comeback. When the final bell rang, the outcome was undeniable. Abubakar Vagayev had done what once seemed impossible. 2 championship belts now rested proudly on his shoulders, proof of his courage and resilience. In the corner, Khamzat could no longer hold back his emotions, wiping away tears and smiling broadly. This victory was far more than a sporting result. It was a historic moment that would forever remain in the story of the Vagayev family and in the history of the sport itself. Did you know why this giant couldn't hold back his tears after the fight? Behind this victory lay a terrible tragedy that only a few knew about. Just a few weeks before the bout, Francis Ngannou lost his little son, who was only 15 months old. The boy's name was Kobe. In his memory, Ngannou had his name tattooed on his left bicep. The loss was so devastating that Ngannou seriously considered ending his career altogether. But at some point, he realized it was precisely for his son that he had to step into the cage one more time, to dedicate this victory to him. Ngannou's opponent was far from a random fighter. The 2-meter Brazilian giant Renan Ferreira, nicknamed The Problem, had long established himself as a dangerous and troublesome opponent. His long reach and powerful punches could cause serious problems for any heavyweight. Many experts doubted whether Ngannou, coming back after a long layoff, would be able to handle such a a challenge. From the very beginning, Ngannou acted with maximum focus. He avoided taking risks and didn't engage in striking exchanges where Ferreira had a certain advantage. Instead, Francis smartly took his opponent to the ground, proving that his arsenal was much broader than many believed. Ferreira tried to impose his game and even caught Ngannou in a triangle attempt, but Francis showed incredible composure and managed to escape the dangerous trap. And then came what fans call the African Thunder. At that very moment, when the referee stepped in and stopped the fight, Ngannou couldn't hold it in any longer. A few heavy hammer fists crashed down on Ferreira, and he was completely switched off. All the emotions he had been suppressing throughout the preparation and the fight burst out. The giant fighter, usually seen as a symbol of strength and intimidation, broke down in tears right there in the octagon.
How does this moment feel to you right now?
I don't know. I can just think about anything that my son could be, you know. I only take this fight because of him. I wanted to fight for him.
For Francis, this triumph was not just a sporting achievement, it was a personal mission, the last gift to little Kobe. A professional judoka, known for his loud statements, decided to prove that no village strongman could compare to him. He walked onto the stage like it was a UFC press conference, with a smug smile, provocative gestures, and loud words. "You're not on my level. What can I say? I'm gonna win no matter what." He didn't just talk, he provoked, he pushed, grabbed his opponent's shoulder, shouted right in his face, trying to get under his skin. He even snatched a plastic bottle from the table and theatrically tossed it toward the arm wrestler. The crowd buzzed, cameras catching every moment. It looked like a hype stunt, but the arm wrestler stayed silent. He didn't respond to the insults, only smirked slightly, as if he already knew how this would end. He understood. Strength is proven by action, not words. The match began. From the very first seconds, it was clear. Akimbo, the strongman's name, didn't know any judo techniques, but his arms, they weren't arms, they were hydraulic clamps. And when the judoka tried to execute a throw, Akimbo locked his grip so tight it felt like he was holding a steel beam. At that moment, the cocky fighter realized this grip wasn't going to break. His technique, speed, and experience all hit a wall of immovable, unshakable power. He hesitated, blamed a bad start, and asked for a rematch. "Still ready to continue?" Akimbo asked with a faint smirk. "Of course I am," the judoka replied, trying to save face in front of the crowd. But the second attempt ended the same way. The arm wrestler's power, composure, and confidence once again put the loudmouth in his place. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Akimbo simply released the grip and said quietly, "Sometimes it's better to talk less." They wrestled a couple more times for the sake of the audience and Stepanov's ego, but each attempt ended the same way. As they say, you can't overcome a cobra's chokehold with judo experience alone. Nevertheless, the show was a success. It was truly a beautiful spectacle.